talked about the beginnings of religious life, which was basically people becoming hermits, and the difficulties with that, and then St. Augustine attempting to establish a community and holding a community together only as long as he lived. With the death of Augustine, two things continued. The first of it was there were a lot of people who went off to live as hermits. Although everyone saw the evils that were possible from that, they didn't know what else to do. And the second thing is there was a series of people who established communities like Augustine's that simply did not go beyond them. So there were a number of attempts at this. But the key figure who came along who actually resolved this is Benedict. And it would be, I think it would be very difficult in looking at the history of the human race to find a person more significant than Benedict. Benedict has had a remarkable impact on things that you wouldn't even think about. If you were to go into, let's say, China and study the Chinese army, you'd find the rules to the army are footnoted to Benedict's rule. If you were to look at the American army, the basis of it is Benedict's rule. Benedict, with a genius that I think is beyond human understanding, I mean, it must have been a direct inspiration from God, found a way for a group of people to live together and the community to sustain itself beyond the individual who started it. And he developed the basic idea of the vows, and we'll go through a little bit about how his rule gathered the people together. But his genius was actually to establish that. And many other people have attempted to do it through history. And to be honest, right now, the growing need in the world, and it's true in the Catholic Church, the religious communities now, the people who really want to form religious communities, are married couples, single men, and single women who want to be in actual communities together, okay? Now, what Benedict's formula is for all male communities or all female communities, okay? But today, the real need, and no one has worked out a rule whereby that works. Ever since Vatican II, people have been very interested in that, and I have never seen a community that lasted more than 20 years when you try and put married people, single men, and single women together. There is a key to it. I don't know what it is, but Benedict found the key to a single gender living together. Before Benedict's rule, I hope you all saw Animal House. That's what happens to people who live together today, okay? But with Benedict's rule, you came on very strictly. And remember, the key to Benedict's rule is poverty, chastity, and obedience. And if you remember the military, let's say remember the military of your youth. Remember the wages they got? And the fact that they really stayed on base, that there was poverty, there was chastity because it was all, one gender, and by God, they had obedience, But and none of them realized that the Franciscans were doing the same thing. It's just the way the military was structured. And I think it's amusing today that people think they can, by a simple rule, somehow do what Benedict did. I think you remember about maybe a year and a half ago, some general who I hope has since been committed, but I don't know. Okay, but anyway, this general made it a rule for no female who's in combat to become pregnant. Good luck. What do you mean make a rule no one can be pregnant? That no one has yet found the key to having men and women live together, or to have married couples in that situation. No one has yet found the key. A lot of people have tried. Not many as stupid as that general, but a lot of people have tried, okay? And so, to understand there is a real genius with regards to Benedict. Now, when I look at St. Augustine, as I mentioned to you before, I can look at the background in his life and tell how he came to friendship as the key to everything, and then how he developed his community. We know absolutely nothing about Benedict. The only thing Benedict left us was a rule. And he wasn't interested in himself. That wasn't the thing. He was about writing the rule and teaching the rule. If you study science, one of the curious things about science is oftentimes when you can't identify a set thing, you can know it's there because of its effects. If you remember, before we sent satellites up, there were several planets and things that they had said were in the universe, and they could tell by the gravitational pull on other things, but there was no way they could see it because like the moon or something was in the way. And then once satellites went up, they discovered they were there. In science, sometimes you can discover things from their effects. That's all we know of Benedict. The first effect of Benedict was his rule. The second effect is we know when he started a community and it stayed on. So we know him from his effects. Now there are lives of St. Benedict, but no life of St. Benedict was written closer than 200 years after his death. So we all regard them in the area of church history, regard them as total fiction. According to part of that, the story is that he had a sister who was named Scholastica, and it basically started a convent. All of that today is regarded as absolute legend. That, you know, the communities, everything are descended from Benedict, and that's really all we know of the whole thing. So anyway, about Benedict, and the date of Benedict, his monastery is about 530, 520, around then is when he establishes the monastery. And so the church was, at this time, as I mentioned, becoming more and more uncomfortable with hermits. But communities did not seem to sustain themselves, so they couldn't pull communities together. And Benedict tried to figure out a way in which people could live together. And the key to his rule, of course, is the vows, and we'll deal a little bit with that later. He drew on an awful lot of material that was written before him. Fortunately, these communities, like St. Augustine's, as they got going as a community, actually kept written histories of themselves, and you could see where it broke down and fell apart. And it was very obvious that the real problem with hermits was that they didn't have the interface with other people in order to take the roughness off their edges. And the real problems with communities is they gathered around an individual. If you and I were to look at the church communities that existed before St. Augustine and before Benedict, you and I would consider them cults. They gathered around an individual, and they existed until that individual, you know, just like Matson or something like that. But the only thing was they had a religious purpose, but they looked very much like cults. So his rule looked a lot at the past. He attempts to preserve the individualism of a hermit, but allows them to sort of live together by the use of the vows. The preservation of the individualism is very, very important. Because remember I told you, the key to spirituality is that God wants to make a saint out of you that has never been, nor will be again. There's something unique about you, your background, your time, your place, that the saint that is to be you has never been seen and will not be seen again. Period. You are in a set place, time, situation, background, understanding, everything. And so if you really want to build this holiness, you have to preserve a spirituality that preserves individuality simultaneously, not letting people live alone. Okay? So you have to find a way to do that. And Benedict was able to do this. He created basically a household. The abbey is basically a household. And the role of the abbot is basically to be the father of the house. He rules kind of like the father of the house. And it's interesting when you read the rule, Benedict's consistent reference to Jesus is he sees Jesus as a judge. Now, remember, we talked about St. Augustine. St. Augustine consistently saw Jesus as a healer, and that we enter into relationship with Jesus so that we can be healed. Benedict sees Jesus really as a judge, and something about this, you know, if you want to see Jesus as the Good Shepherd, you know, you can open your New Testament anywhere and go about 3 pages in either direction, you'll find something. Okay, no problem. If you want to see Jesus work a healing, you want to see Jesus as healer, turn the New Testament open anywhere. You won't need to turn a page. You'll find it. But if you want to find references to Jesus as judge,